Once upon a time, in a quiet village surrounded by endless fields and dense, whispering woods, lived a kind and humble man named Roger. He was a farmer, well loved by the villagers, especially the children, who adored the sweet apples from his orchard. Roger had no family, but he never felt lonely. His orchard was his life, and his laughter echoed through the trees as he worked from dawn to dusk. Every autumn, Roger would gather the ripest apples and share them freely. Children ran barefoot through the fallen leaves, their pockets stuffed with fruit, their laughter ringing through the crisp air. He never asked for anything in return, believing that kindness was its own reward. But kindness would not save him. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, Roger was returning home from the village market when he spotted something strange near his orchard. A hunched figure stood among the trees, its long fingers brushing against the apples as though searching for something. The air around it was thick and rancid, carrying a scent of decay. "You there? What are you doing in my orchard?" Roger called, gripping his walking stick tightly. The figure turned. It was a man, or at least, it had been once. His skin was sallow, stretched thin over sharp cheekbones, and his eyes, gleamed like dying embers in a pit of ash. In his hands, he cradled an apple, rotten, blackened, leaking something thick and foul. "A gift," the stranger rasped, his voice brittle as dead leaves. "Take it, and your apples will never rot." Roger hesitated. Every instinct in him screamed to run, to leave this cursed thing behind. But he had always been a polite man, and so, reluctantly, he reached out and took the apple. The moment it touched his palm, the orchard shivered. The trees creaked as though sighing, their branches curling inward like skeletal fingers. The stranger smiled, too many teeth in a mouth too wide, before turning and vanishing into the darkness. That night, Roger awoke to a deep, stabbing pain in his chest. Sweat drenched his sheets, and his breath came in short, shallow gasps. He tried to rise, but a terrible weight pressed upon him, as though invisible hands were holding him down. The whispers began then, low, sibilant voices rustling through the trees outside his window. By morning, Roger was pale, his skin waxy and cold. But something strange had happened. The apples on his trees had grown larger, redder, more perfect than ever before. When he touched them, they were warm, pulsing like living things. Curious, he bit into one. The taste was wrong. Sickeningly sweet, with an aftertaste of something metallic. Blood? He spat it out, horror curling in his stomach. But when he looked at the apple in his hand, it was untouched, a whole, pristine, mocking. Days passed, and Roger grew weaker. His once vibrant orchard darkened, the branches twisting unnaturally, their roots pushing through the soil like veins. The villagers noticed his absence and whispered of a sickness, a curse. Then, one stormy night, Roger did not return from his orchard. The next morning, they found him sprawled beneath his oldest apple tree, his eyes wide and unseeing, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. His hands were clawed at his chest, fingers dug deep into his own flesh as though trying to tear something out. His body was cold, but the apples around him were warm, pulsing like hearts still beating. The villagers buried him right there, beneath his favorite tree. But even in death, Roger did not rest. At night, the orchard whispered. Shadows moved between the trees, and strange figures were seen lurking near the grave. The apples, once beloved, were now feared. Anyone who ate one became ill, their dreams haunted by Roger's pale face and hollow eyes. Then, the disappearances began. First, a young boy who had ignored the warnings and plucked an apple from the cursed tree. He was never seen again. Then another child, and another. The villagers, terrified, abandoned the orchard, letting it rot, letting the branches stretch unchecked toward the sky like arms reaching for something unseen. But still, some dared to test the legend. One foolish child, eager to prove his bravery, crept into the orchard one cold October night. The air was thick with the scent of overripe fruit, sickly sweet and cloying. His fingers trembled as he reached up and plucked a perfect, glistening apple from the tallest branch. The moment his fingers closed around it, the ground beneath him trembled. A hand, withered, skeletal, blackened with decay, burst from the soil, seizing his wrist in a grip colder than death. A voice, dry and rasping, whispered in his ear. "That's my apple." The boy's screams echoed through the empty orchard, piercing the night. But by morning, there was no sign of him, only the wind rustling through the apple trees, and a single untouched fruit resting atop old Roger's grave. And so the legend lives on. If you ever find yourself near an abandoned orchard, its trees gnarled and swaying without wind, beware. Do not touch the apples. Do not linger after dark. For old Roger is still watching. Still waiting. And he does not like thieves.
Old Roger is dead and gone to his grave. Hum, ha. Gone to his grave. They planted an apple tree over his head. Hum, ha. Over his head. The apples grew ripe and ready to drop. Hum, ha. Ready to drop. There came a high wind and blew them all off. Hum, ha. Blew them all off. There came an old woman to pick them all up. Hum, ha. Pick them all up. Old Roger got up and gave her a knock. Hum, ha. Gave her a knock, which made the old woman go hipperty hop. Hum, ha. Hipperty hop.